The EPA's new rules aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector by 90% by 2050, by requiring coal and gas plants to use carbon capture and storage or green hydrogen. Here is a script for this section of your video. The power sector is the largest stationary source of greenhouse gases in the US, emitting 25% of the overall domestic emissions in 2021. These emissions are mainly caused by burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas to generate electricity. But this could soon change, thanks to the new rules proposed by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, on May 11, 2023. The EPA announced new carbon pollution standards for coal and gas-fired power plants that will protect public health, reduce harmful pollutants and deliver up to $85 billion in climate and public health benefits over the next 2 decades. The new standards are based on cost-effective and available control technologies that can be applied directly to power plants. For new gas-fired combustion turbines, the EPA is proposing a limit of 450 pounds of CO2 per megawatt-hour, lbCO2/MWH, which can be met by using natural gas combined cycle technology. For existing coal, oil and gas-fired steam generating units, the EPA is proposing a limit of 1,300 pounds CO2/MWH, which can be met by using carbon capture and sequestration/storage, CCS, or low GHG hydrogen co-firing. For certain existing gas-fired combustion turbines, the EPA is proposing a limit of 750 pounds CO2/MWH, which can be met by using natural gas co-firing. CCS is a technology that captures CO2 from the exhaust of power plants and injects it underground for permanent storage. Low GHG hydrogen co-firing is a technology that blends hydrogen with natural gas or coal to reduce the carbon intensity of the fuel. Natural gas co-firing is a technology that replaces some of the coal with natural gas in coal-fired power plants to reduce their emissions. The EPA estimates that these new standards will reduce CO2 emissions from the power sector by 90% by 2050 compared to 2005 levels. This will help the US achieve its goal of net zero emissions by 2050 and avoid the worst impacts of climate change. The new standards will also reduce other pollutants like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides and mercury, which can cause respiratory diseases, heart attacks and premature deaths. The EPA is providing owners and operators of power plants with ample lead time and substantial compliance flexibilities, allowing them to make sound long-term planning and investment decisions. The EPA is also encouraging states to develop their own plans to implement the standards and guidelines, taking into account their specific circumstances and needs. The new rules are part of President Biden's policy agenda to cut greenhouse gases and move the U.S. closer to a clean energy future. Together with other recent EPA actions to address health-harming pollution from the power sector, such as regulating ozone-forming emissions and limiting toxic air pollutants from coal ash ponds, the new rules deliver on the administration's commitment to reduce pollution from the power sector while providing long-term regulatory certainty and operational flexibility. The EPA's new rules will also help the U.S. meet its international commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement and demonstrate global leadership in tackling the climate crisis. The Paris Climate Agreement is a landmark deal that was signed by nearly 200 countries in 2015 to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change. It aims to keep the global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The U.S. announced its intention to join the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016, but later withdrew under the previous administration. However, President Biden rejoined the agreement on his first day in office and pledged to reduce national greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. One of the key sectors that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. is the power sector, which relies heavily on coal and gas-fired power plants. These plants produce large amounts of carbon dioxide, a potent greenhouse gas that traps heat in the atmosphere and causes global warming. To address this problem, the EPA has proposed its first rule under the American Innovation and Manufacturing (AIM) Act of 2020 to phase down the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, highly potent greenhouse gases commonly used in refrigerators, air conditioners, and many other applications. The AIM Act directs EPA to sharply reduce production and consumption of these harmful pollutants by using an allowance allocation and trading program. This phase-down will decrease the production and import of HFCs in the United States by 85% over the next 15 years. A global HFC phase-down is expected to avoid up to 0.5 degrees Celsius of global warming by 2100. The EPA has also proposed another rule that would require coal and gas-fired power plants to eliminate nearly all their climate-warming carbon dioxide emissions in just a little over a decade, by using technologies that capture and then store deep underground 90% of carbon dioxide from these plants. The EPA projects that these rules would avoid up to 617 million metric tons of carbon dioxide through 2042, which is equivalent to the annual emissions of 137 million passenger vehicles, or about half of the cars on the road today. The EPA's proposed rules are not only good for the climate, but also for public health and the economy. The agency estimates that in 2030, these rules would prevent 1,300 premature deaths, more than 800 hospital and emergency room visits, and more than 300,000 cases of asthma attacks due to reduced air pollution. The agency also values the net climate and health benefits at up to $85 billion. Moreover, these rules would create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs that will combat climate change and promote American leadership in innovation and manufacturing of new climate-safe products. By phasing down HFCs and carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, the EPA is taking a major action to help keep global temperature rise in check and fulfill its obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement. These rules also demonstrate that the U.S. is serious about tackling the climate crisis and leading by example on the world stage.